one of India's largest e-commerce businesses. An alumnus of the prestigious Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, Mr. Kalra also holds a bachelor's degree in economics from St. Stephen's College, New Delhi. Before his entrepreneurial venture with Make My Trip, Mr. Kalra worked at corporate giants like GE Capital, ABN AMRO, and ABF Bowling. MakeMyTrip.com was launched in the USA in the year 2000 and made its debut in India in 2005. Under Mr. Kalra's leadership, the company had a very successful $70 million listing on the NASDAQ in August 2010. Mr. Kalra then took on the role of Group CEO in August 2013 and was the driving force behind multiple mergers and acquisitions, the most prominent of them being the acquisition of GoIBO, its biggest rival, which further consolidated Make My Trip's place as India's largest online travel portal. Mr. Kalra, acclaimed for his business acumen, also serves on various think tanks, strategic bodies, and industry bodies. He has been president of the Delhi chapter of TIE, vice president of IAMAI, and currently serves as a member of the NASSCOM Internet Council and is an active member of TIE. He has also been a part of tourism and travel committees of FICCI and CII. Mr. Kalra also contributes meaningfully to society through NGOs like IIM Gurgaon and the Ashoka University. In both places, he is one of the co-founders and member of the governing body. Mr. Kalra also takes active interest in sports and enjoys swimming, yoga, and adventure sports. His excellence in entrepreneurship and leadership have been recognized all around the world, and he was recognized by Ernst & Young as Entrepreneur of the Year, Business Transformation in 2011, and as the most powerful digital influencer in India by KPMG in 2012. Among us today, he plays the very familiar role of inspiration in chief as he guides us young students through his corporate journey in a fireside chat. We welcome you, sir. It's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Aryan. Lovely introduction. And it's my pleasure to actually be speaking to SRCC students. I have a long connection with SRCC, which I should have mentioned earlier. So not that I studied there, but all my closest friends from school actually ended up going to SRCC. So I think I spent more time in SRCC sometimes than in my own college, or vice versa. All these guys would come to my college. So wherever the pastures were greener, the students went there. But we had a really good time in SRCC. So I have very, very many good friends from there. And of course, it's a top college. So we love to hire people who've come out of SRCC, gone on to do either their ACA or their BCom or their CA. And it's some of the smartest minds out there. So I'm very excited to talk to you guys today.
Thank you, sir. Let me now introduce my two co-moderators for the evening. Hardik Dua, originally from Meerut. He's pursuing a postgraduate program in global business operations from SRCC GBO, as Reena ma'am mentioned. He has an engineering background. He's a BTech graduate from Galgodias College and has worked at Cognizant Technology Solutions in Pune. Our other co-moderator, Ayushi Srivastava, is the final year BCom honors student at SRCC. She's a native of the city of Nawabs, Lucknow, and an avid reader with an aptitude for problem solving. She is due to begin her corporate journey with a consultancy firm in the coming months. I now hand it over to Ayushi.
Hi, Hardik.
Hello, sir.
Hello, sir, and thank you, Aryan. I would now like to introduce our third moderator, Aryan Grover. He's a second-year student at Shriram College of Commerce, and he runs two startups, one in the home solution space and the other in the water remediation space. He spends his free time listening to podcasts and watching live sports. So we look forward to a great chat ahead. But I would like to request all the attendees that if they have any questions for Mr. Kalra, please address it to Aryan in the chat box below. I now hand it over to Hardik to begin with today's fireside chat.
Thank you, Ayushi. I will once again welcome you, Deepsa, very heartily to SRCC's fireside chat. And I'll just begin by asking you the first question of the day. So the first question is, sir, that you are not only an alumnus of the two prestigious colleges of India, St. Stephen's and IIM Ahmedabad, but also one of the founders of Ashoka University. So what was your inspiration behind setting up a private university in India, and what were the gaps in the education sector that you seek to fulfill through setting up of it?
Sure, Hardik, a great opening question. And I can tell you that the inspiration for me to join the Ashoka team, there were others who were there already and they get more credit, but I was in the early kind of group. There are many now. It's a very unique project. It's a group philanthropic project, actually, entire Ashoka. Now there are many founders, but the original folks, Ashish Dhawan, who's probably the driving force behind it, along with Pramod Sinha, Sanjeev Bikhchandani. For me, I think there were 2 or 3 factors which were pretty compelling when they came and they discussed this idea with me. Some of them I knew quite well. The first one was the gap in liberal arts in the country. So I came from a liberal arts college from St. Stephen, and I realized that there were very few good colleges in the country for liberal arts and very few new ones that had come. Whereas, things had been changing a lot on the liberal arts scene. I'd also been kind of exposed to liberal arts around the world, particularly in the US. My daughter was applying to college about 3 years ago. I guess she's now going to be a rising junior. So she's finished sophomore, finished 2 years. So around that time, I was getting exposed to the scene through other friends, children, etc. And I was kind of seeing the way liberal arts was being taught in different parts of the world. And I felt there's a big gap in India. Second reason was that the curriculum had not really changed that much from when I graduated in 1990. And for me, that really hit me very hard, that, something which should be changing with the times has not changed that much. And that's not good for the students. Yes, there were some very good colleges and some very good professors. They still are, who managed to inspire students. But by and large, people would take DU or other liberal art colleges in the country too casually, and college was just seen like, okay, we're just going to, go through and get our marks and have a good time and party, but not really learn. That was very few students who were there for the learning. And maybe part of the mistake was that the curriculum itself had not changed. So I liked the idea of bringing in a fresh curriculum with world-class teachers. And thirdly was the kind of people involved and the fact that it was a philanthropic project. I thought that's the right way to give back. So for me, I think education is clearly the game changer. Whether it's Ashoka, I'm also one of the founders for the IIM Ahmedabad Endowment Fund, which was launched fairly recently. 10 of us thought it's about time we should have our own endowment fund with a very good college like IIM Ahmedabad, but we actually didn't have an endowment fund, and people were just randomly helping college, but we can, help college go to the proverbial next level with it. So yeah, I think education is the game changer. And I can tell you at every other board meeting of Ashoka, we actually are very happy to say that we wish there were 100 more Ashokas, and we don't have to do them all. So it's okay if we end up doing a few of them, but if this sparks off more such colleges, and I think a few have already come and are doing quite well. So there's a college down south called Kriya, which has come up very strong. And there are going to be many more. So this model will hopefully prove itself. Philanthropic model is a little hard to do always, but I think even if it's for profit, but done with the right intentions, it can do pretty
well. Right, all right, sir. Thank you.
Sir, do you believe that the journey to launching a startup is smoother if the founders have certain years of corporate experience under their belt?
Yeah, it's a great question again, Ayushi. So, different strokes for different folks, to be honest. I think there'll be some people who will say, I can't wait to do my own thing. That's what I want to do always. And I'm not really going to waste any time working for someone or for another company. For me, I have to say that my work experience has proven to be very useful. Initially, maybe not so much. So I worked for 8 years in 3 different companies. Aryan called out in the introduction. I started my career with a bank, with ABN AMRO, a Dutch bank, worked there 3 years. Then brought a company called AMF Bowling into the country. It was a very entrepreneurial role, but I was working for this company, trying to start something new in the country. Didn't necessarily work out that well, but great learning. And then I worked for a short while, about 1.5 years only with GE Capital, when I was bitten by the dot-com bug and I couldn't wait any longer to start my own thing. But I can tell you all those experiences, particularly working with some really admirable seniors, bosses, managers, I learned a lot from them. I think as the company Make My Trip started scaling up, willy-nilly I would fall back on some of these experiences and, what would so-and-so have done in this situation kind of thing. And that becomes part of your subconscious. So I think there's a lot of learning on the job. I call it learning by osmosis. And I think you cannot get that always if you start your own thing. You'll probably do very well. So in fact, some of the, best entrepreneurs in the world haven't even finished college. They're all college dropouts, as we know, because they couldn't wait. But most of them had something really unique, something very special. They were tech founders. And along the way, if you've noticed, they probably had different people come and run the company for them. So whether it's the Google founders, whether it was, I think even at some point of time at Microsoft, Bill Gates handed over the baton, and various other such companies. Facebook, if you see, Mark continues to do certain things, but he's got people like Cheryl, etc., running the company. So I think for me, my core strength was probably not tech. Product was an acquired strength, but was probably overall management. So for me, those 8 years of corporate WorkX have been invaluable. And my advice to a lot of young entrepreneurs is that, if you're getting good experience, maybe in different places or different departments, it'll really hold you in good stead as you scale up your company.
All right. So I'll ask the third question, which is just an extension of what you said. So 25 years back, bowling was not at all popular in India. But still you joined AMF bowling and tried to play bowling as a sport and even introduce it in the Olympics. So can we say that that understanding in you to fill an existing gap of the market was always there inside you? You have like always challenged the status quo. So how did you motivate yourself not to play safe, not to settle down, and most importantly, that not to give up?
I've got to compliment you, Hardik. I think it's one of the smartest questions I've been asked about the past. So really well researched. I don't know if it was that, to be honest. I think it was more as a 26-year-old, you're pretty starry-eyed and you believe you can change the world, and something shouldn't change with that. I was also very frankly quite sure I don't want to be a banker all my life. I made some great connects there, people I learned a lot from. Even today, I'm very close to the people at ABN AMRO then. But banking was not my calling. I wanted something more exciting. I had a couple of job offers. I almost joined, in the kind of branded garments business, or there was something in the food business. Very exciting roles both. But when this role came about, I just felt like, wow, this is going to be really exciting. I don't think I thought too hard and long about will it, is it going to kind of be the right career move? I was very taken in. And I have to say the confidence came from the fact that when you're holding a good degree, and including, when you guys pass out from SRCC, whether you top that up or not, and I just learned in the pre-chat that you even have a postgrad course in business management, etc. You can use that degree, and this is really important for all the students out there. You can use that degree either as an insurance policy, or you can use it as a noose. A noose is a Fasi ka fanda. So basically, you can either say, I've got this degree and I'm going to, only do the right thing, or you can play on the front foot. You can go ahead and be bold. You can do different things, knowing very well in the early stage of your career, if things don't work out, you have something to fall back on. I think for me, I did have that level of confidence. Also, I can tell you that the MBA from IIM definitely, I think it armed me with the kind of confidence you need that if there's a problem and a new kind of problem which someone hasn't solved, then you will take a structured approach to it and you'll figure it out. So I think that those helped. I don't think I was thinking so much of the gap, but yes, when I was reviewing the business plan, I felt that if China could have 10,000 lanes, then India at that point of time definitely deserved a few thousand lanes. It's another thing that real estate was so expensive that I could only put in 200 lanes. So financially, it didn't work out, but I learned a lot because I think I learned my street smarts and my entrepreneurial, I cut my entrepreneurial teeth definitely while doing AMF.
Thank you, sir.
So you talked about how you were inspired by the dot-com bubble. And I recently read that the dot-com bubble played a critical role in shaping the future of Make My Trip. Have there been other instances where you've been able to turn adverse situations into your favor?
Okay, I can't keep saying it's a great question, but I'm impressed with you guys. You really are. You're asking better questions than some of my investors ask me. So,
Deep, I can come in. This is the power of Shriram College of Commerce. Don't you regret not joining it?
yeah, not truly, but I spent a lot of time there, so it's okay. I picked up the best of things from there. But no, so I think the dot-com bust or the dot-com bubble, whatever you want to call it, in 2001 or so, was a deadly kind of blow to the industry. We had early stage funding. We had got $2 million. We were promised another $1 million, but believe it or not, our fund itself folded up because of the dot-com bubble. So I had to buy back the company from them. It was quite a crazy time because obviously didn't have that kind of money, understood the concepts of distress valuation. We went into a pretty hard phase. I would say 4 years from 2001 to 2005 were really bootstrapped. We never had more than 2 or 3 months of expenses. I went without salary for 18 months. Ironically, I'm back in that during COVID times, but that's the way life goes. But you know, it tested our mettle. It really tested our mettle because the people who stayed back were the people who believed in the business, who believed in what I was trying to build. 2 of them went on to become co-founders because they sacrificed so much during that time. They also took deep cuts in salary, 50% kind of cuts. And I think it also tested my own belief beyond venture capital, and which is really important. So when I look back, undoubtedly that was the best phase, which was the toughest time because your back is towards the wall. Every solution has to be innovative because in terms of resources, you have a finite number of people. Of course, they are willing to give you an infinite number of hours. And I really mean it. I think during that period, we probably worked most Sundays half a day. Of course, we worked Saturdays and many people slept in office very often. I think on the average, most of those folks would have spent 30, 40, 50 nights in office. Everyone kept a toothbrush in office. So it was a pretty crazy time. And it taught us a lot, but then you always come out with the smartest solution. So I think that's a very important phase for anyone who wants to turn entrepreneurial, to go through a phase where you're really tested in terms of your belief. And you can't be a fair weather entrepreneur because storms will come. And what more poignant time than this right now, as we're living through COVID times. And if you look at the travel industry, probably the worst hit. And if not the worst hit, as badly hit as anyone else, and probably going to take the longest time to come out because that's the nature of this industry, right? You're going to travel from point A to point B. You're going to live in a hotel. You've got to do things like that, which don't work well with the virus. So this is a time where you're again being tested, which is not only in your resolve, but how are you going to weather this storm? What is your change of strategy as your revenues dry up? And I don't want to preempt some of your questions because I'm sure you've got some of these, but that gave great training. So I think the dot-com bust actually, the battle scars that we learned to survive that crisis when we actually had an existentialism crisis, truly. Today we don't have that. So that teaches you a lot. It gives you again a very different kind of confidence that come what may, your business is going to be healthy, it's going to stay. You hopefully can take care of all your people, but in some cases, not everyone. But more importantly, how can you make your costs even more kind of aligned to revenues, which is how can you cut back on variable costs? What can you do to restructure your fixed costs so that you're a lighter weight business to go through this? And how do you start calibrating your spend? So how do you start then bringing back spend little by little and measuring it and looking at the ROI of all the marketing spend and other spends that you do? So it was a great learning and a great time for me. And so adversity does help you in ways that fair times and fair weather can never, I can assure you that.
So, as you said, the travel and hospitality sectors are in doldrums because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And because of that, many companies in these sectors have had to revisit their manpower requirements. How have you endeavored to raise the morale of your employees in such uncertain times?
Yeah, no easy way, frankly. I think it's been, that's the toughest challenge, to keep people still motivated. So when we went into lockdown, and we went into lockdown, I guess around mid-March, and ever since that, we've been working pretty much from home. We've had a few days in office, not everyone, a few people. I've gone in a few times, and we've realized that it's very hard to work in the outside. So if you're on the floor, as we call it, on open workstations, even if you've got someone sitting 6 or 10 feet away, that's the easy part. The tough part is to work keeping a mask on for 8 hours, 10 hours. Yes, you can probably remove it, momentarily if you go to the washroom somewhere else, etc. But it's, you're not very comfortable. I spent 3 hours today in a meeting with about 12 people in a very large banquet hall. It was a tourism committee meeting, and everyone was wearing masks except when they spoke, and then you would remove your mask. Not everyone was that comfortable. So we decided that, listen, we will find ways, smart ways to work from home. We took this as an opportunity to build products and features, including some pretty hairy projects around unification of code, which were just not able to get addressed during normal times. Because during normal times, there's so much of business pressures, day-to-day pressures, that you keep saying, yeah, this is the right thing to do. But guess what? We'll do it next quarter. We'll do it next month, kind of thing. So now we said enough is enough. Let's use this opportunity when business pressures are not there to pick up those projects. It had a dual purpose. So firstly, it'll hold us in very good stead when we come out of this. But more importantly, get our people in product, in technology, in user experience, in QA, very busy, including some business people. So those guys and girls have been busier than ever before. In fact, I think people are getting burnt out working from home. They're saying, hey, this goes on and on. There's no start and there's no end. We start morning, we end evening, weekends and all. I think people have now found their rhythm. Of course, they're all dying to come out. Many of them keep telling me, listen, we really want to now come to office. And I said, you're welcome to come in small numbers, but trust me, you won't find it that comfortable. You'll come in for a few days and then you'll say, no, guess what? So maybe we'll find the right rhythm. We started experimenting just yesterday. We called 2 lines of business in. So our corporate group was there, our customer service group was there, and our airlines group was there. But all told, we had just 70 people in an office which can seat 1,800 people, but very well spread. And there were some group meetings, some workforce meetings. So they enjoyed it, but they probably want to do that, once a week. And not everyone could come. And many people have gone back home, which is fine. We're more interested that everyone, including all of you on the call, start traveling. So we're trying to find new ways to make travel safe, which is, of course, wearing a mask, but even the perception. People are worried about travel. Now, some of it is well-founded, but I can tell you a lot of it is ill-founded. People think it's risky, but actually it's not as risky if you're careful. So we're trying to find ways to open up. In fact, I'm working very hard on a testing protocol saying, okay, till we get a vaccine, till we get a cure, I think aggressive testing is the way out. So why would we not test people every time before they board a flight? Not immediately before, because if it's a PCR test, it takes 24 hours to get the report. Maybe it's an RT-PCR, like we've just started on international, by the way. So now from the 8th of August, anyone coming into the country, if they've got a negative certificate on a PCR test, they can avoid institutional quarantine, which is a big move. And I think we can take some credit for it. We've been putting together various plans, but we're asking for it to be made reciprocal. I'm actually pushing for it to be done for all domestic travel as well. If not the PCR test, which is expensive, maybe it can be the antigen test. It's better than nothing. And then if there are symptoms on arrival, then people can be put through a PCR test. So I think there are many things around testing. Dubai and other places are doing a good job. So we are hopeful that over the next few weeks, you'll hear that. And that's why I'm spending a lot of my time and energies. I think some of you might be aware that our team was responsible in building the Arogya Setu app, something which we are really delighted and excited. And I can tell you that was our bright spark during this pandemic. And it was the idea of one guy, one senior technologist in our company, Rahul Goel, had this idea. We sponsored it, I pushed it, we got it through the government, and literally in weeks we built it, and in 13 days we had 50 million downloads. Today it's got 150 million downloads. Pro bono effort from us, but something we're very proud of. So I think there are a lot of opportunities you can get during these times as well. And yes, things are very tough in travel, but you've got to always see opportunities. Also, you've got to look at diversification. So We've launched an ad tech platform, so we can now serve ads just like Facebook, Google, etc. do. And our, kind of users who come to our platforms are obviously of, I guess, a higher income. They're only coming to buy something. We also are looking at a couple of other very kind of related businesses, because we don't want to invest a ton of money into a new business, but how we can leverage our customer base and give them something today what they're looking for. So if you go to our platforms today, you'll probably get answers to the most important thing: where all can I travel? Every day I get a couple of people asking me this. So I said, go to our apps, go to there and go and check out, because we have all the rules and regulations today on the app and on the website telling you where you can travel, where it's safe, what are the precautions, what are the norms, what are the quarantine rules, etc., which is what everyone wants to know. And now that's become the first step for traveling, not research. It's almost like, where can I go? And then the next step is, okay, how do I get there, etc. So yeah, we're trying to make the best of a tough situation. Not easy, keeping people motivated, excited. Some repurposing of people also, getting into other roles. But trying to keep them motivated is very important.
All right.
Thank you so much, sir.
So, sir, my questions are always an extension of your answers. The last question which I'll ask is that recently Make My Trip has entered into the food delivery business by partnering with 5-star hotel chains like Marriott and Rosette. So what kind of product differentiation strategy have you envisaged to make it stand out amongst an already crowded space, as firms like Swiggy and Zomato have been there competing for years?
Yeah, actually, let me clarify that. I think this has got misrepresented in press, but I can tell you it only came out of a very simple thing. 2 large hotels in the city actually called me within a couple of days, and they said, listen, we've got quarantined and stranded customers, and our kitchens are open, and can you help put that message out? And we said, sure, you're our partners, we'll put the message out. And they were delivering the meals. Then they said, we can only deliver the meals within 10 kind of kilometers radius. Can you help with delivery? And we said, we're not really delivery people, but maybe we can get tie up with a third party, which we did. And we got Dunzo and some other people to start delivering them. So that's how it started. It's out to help the hotels. We are by no stretch planning to compete with either Zomato or Swiggy. It's been so that not for any other reason. It's just an area where there's too much capital already been invested and a lot more going in. So I don't think it's a business which can start giving us positive results in a hurry.
Thank you, sir.
So, sir, we now move on to questions from the audience.
Sure.
Someone wants to know that it's almost 3 decades.
Aryan,
Yes, ma'am?
We have the
principal ma'am with us.
Yes.
She's just joined us, please. Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. Ma'am, you're on mute. Can't hear you.
Thank you so much for being with us. Please let the session progress. I'll come back once he's through with the question answer session. I would not like to interrupt in between. I'm listening to you, sir, with pleasure equally.
Okay, thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So someone from the audience is saying that it's been almost 3 decades since you received your MBA degree, and now you're at the helm of a corporate giant hiring a lot of MBAs. What difference do you see in, say, the education that they received or in their confidence demeanor from 3 decades ago and now?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question, even though you're making me sound very old. But yeah, it has been 3 decades. That's 28 years of passing out. So time does fly. And 30 years of finishing my college in DU. So right where you guys are. I think the degrees, at least when I look at the MBA, I think the MBA of today is far more conversant with what's going on around them. So I think most of the degrees, and I have no doubt that the postgraduate degree that SRCC program that you're offering is also in tune with what's going on today. We had some phenomenal cases that we studied, but a lot of them were dated and the same cases. So I meet people who are 10 years my senior and 10 years my junior, and I can tell you we still discuss the same cases and we have a big laugh. They were, well, the cases were there to bring out certain points, and the idea was to understand a certain part of finance, a certain part of marketing. So whether it was cash flow planning, or it was raising money, or it was even marketing, CRM, etc. So that purpose is served. But very often, those cases were people couldn't relate to them. So today, what I've seen, a lot of the cases have been, really kept fresh, and people have worked on new case materials. In fact, one of my favorite professors from IIM, Professor Abhinandan Jain, very famous name in marketing, about 6-7 years ago, wrote a case on online marketing on Make My Trip. And he said, this is what my students today want to. And it was just fascinating to see Professor Jain in his 70s now, not that fit, but he wrote that whole case himself. And he said, and I'm going to teach this to the students. And will you do a guest lecture? And I said, with pleasure. So I think the MBA itself has changed for the better. It's more relevant. It's more in sync with the times. And students today are definitely more aware. And this is not only because of the degree. I think it's because of the inputs that they're getting from their respective colleges and the tremendous amount of interaction that they're having with the corporate world. And lastly, I think it's also overall the exposure that we all are getting, particularly folks like you. Today, with the click of a button, you're hearing talks from legendary, icons in whether it's in corporate life or in entrepreneurship. It's all there. You'll go to YouTube and you'll see it. You don't even have to read today. You can actually see and hear. I can tell you it was very hard. If we got a clip at that point of time of someone who was a legend, let's say like, Jack Welch, we wanted to hear him from GE. It was very hard to get. So the first time I saw some of these guys speaking, it was surreal. Today, it's up to you how much time you want to spend, not just reading books, but you can actually hear them. And, today even join, podcasts and Zoomcasts, etc., and be talking to anyone. So I think students today are much smarter, more aware, and more kind of ready to take on different challenges. If I can also point out a negative, not all is good. I think people today are more jumpy. So I think people today are more impatient when they come into the corporate. In our time, I think we were willing to kind of give a few years always before deciding if this is for me or not. Now people are thinking in quarters and they're happy to keep moving around, good or bad. And if I look at the generation beyond me, senior to me, my dad's generation, many of them worked in one company for decades. So my dad worked for 30 years with the same company and retired with them. So, it was a very different world. And things are changing. So I'm hoping we'll find the right balance between being very aware, but not yet being jumpy, as I call it.
Do you think that's due to a rise in, say, the entrepreneurial spirit? Do you think it's because a lot of people now having, like you said, access to these stories as to how a 36-year-old Mark Zuckerberg is now worth $50 billion having dropped out from college? Is it because of that?
I think partially. Undoubtedly, a lot of, entrepreneurship is definitely not taboo. At one point of time, it was taboo. I think that's changed a lot in India. It's very well accepted. You don't have to be from a business family. If you're a technocrat or otherwise, or, non-technocrats are able to set up ventures, get early stage funding. So firstly, it's exposure, like I said, and that's the exposure part. Secondly is the availability of startup capital. I think that's fundamentally changed. The ecosystem has changed. So you could not get this kind of startup capital so easily 2 decades or 3 decades ago. Even a decade ago, it's changed vastly. And today, there's this no dearth of startup funds. In fact, people are launching funds right now during COVID times. And we have a very interesting program coming up on Friday and Saturday. And I think it's free this time. It's called India Internet Day. It's from TIE. I'm on the board of TIE. It's a not-for-profit. And if any of you are interested, it's a great time to spend 2 full days. It's a free program. And I'll get you guys more details. I'll send it to Reena ma'am, and then she can share it with all of you. It'll be a great place to actually hear, including people like, I think we have the founder of Zoom. We have the worldwide managing partner of Sequoia Capital. So we flipped it around while organizing this conference. We said, yes, it's not physical, but I think that's an opportunity. At least that's what I told everyone. Now aim to get anyone in the world. All they have to do is give you 45 minutes or 1 hour of their time from their couch. So let's flip it around. We don't need them to come because everyone's virtual. So we've got a whole array of really great speakers, and the number of funds and the number of startup funds. One of the big reasons is availability of capital, opportunities, these great stories, of course. And I think, yeah, the demand supply. I think today there's a lot of capital chasing not so many great or potentially great entrepreneurs.
Sir, about the capital, I have one question from the audience, which says that barring the technical expertise, you also need the sort of advice and the experience that a VC investor brings to the table. Do you think VCs are still as willing to invest amidst the pandemic?
Yeah, this is obviously an unusual situation. It is a blip in some cases. So it depends on the sector. I think there are some sectors which have shown that they've done incredibly well. So I think all of you would be aware that anyone with e-commerce and delivery has done exceedingly well. In fact, I don't know if you picked up the statistic that Hero Motors has sold more motorcycles last month than they sold before, and the reason was delivery boys. So there are interesting stories. FMCG's done really well because most of the people are now sitting at home and consuming and not going out. So a lot of things got swapped. Of course, remote entertainment, etc., or Zoom conferencing and the stuff has done well. But there are many sectors. So healthcare has seen a new resurgence. Pardon me, a lot of bright ideas in healthcare today, and people are lining up and queuing up to find the best of them. So I think there are sectors which are hot and people are ready to invest in. But today, if you're launching a travel startup, I think capital might be a little harder to come by.
And sir, about the mentality in India, a decade ago, you took Make My Trip public in a listing in the USA, even though Make My Trip had already been in India for about 5-6 years back then. What was the rationale behind that? Why choose the USA over, say, the Indian market?
Yeah, at that point of time, it was a fairly straightforward, kind of decision, because the number of internet companies listed in India were very few. I think the only one listed was InfoEdge, Naukri.com. And the awareness of or the appreciation of an internet company, internet asset was just not there. At the same point of time, I had counted there were over 100 internet companies already listed in the US, of which at least 30% were overseas companies. So people understood the sector. We were obviously able to get more, like when you actually said the IPO wasn't really for 70 million. We raised 70 million plus Greenshoe another 10 million in the IPO, but it was largely because and it was oversubscribed actually over 15 times, and stock price moved up almost 100% on day one because there was a dearth of those kind of assets. So I think that decision got validated. It's a tougher market. It's a more expensive market to maintain your listing, but it's a market which definitely understands the new business model. In 10 years, things have changed here, but not too many listings, interestingly. So if you look at it and I'll give you the reason also. So you had Just Dial list out here, but as an e-commerce company, we've had very few listings. So, and the reason is because the private markets have become very deep. The kind of capital available today on the private space, and that's why even companies like Uber, etc., kept delaying their listing because they could raise $1 billion in a private round. They didn't need to go public. But I think that correction has started to happen, and maybe this pandemic will actually further catalyze that.
Right. I think we have time for one more from the audience. And we have Parth asking us, sir, while developing an aggregator model of business, what are the most important aspects related to capital that one should keep in mind?
Okay, not only for aggregator, I think your capital planning for any new business has to be done very, very carefully. India has become quite an expensive market. Gone are the days, and when I say expensive, I mean the cost of customer acquisition has become very expensive. So irrespective of your model, you should budget a pretty high cost. And then the whole focus should be actually on building loyalty if you can. So I always say that it's okay if you are incentivizing people for trial, which is the first time. But if people are coming back for the incentive, then that's not the real reason. The reason for people to come back, which is called repeat customers, which is probably the holy grail in all our businesses, should be the experience. Should be because that you offer a better experience than people are able to get otherwise. And that's the reason. So if you can build in a model where you have a high repeat and you can actually do that, then you can manage with lesser capital. But why I say India has become expensive, because there's a lot of money again. So one of your questions was the food delivery space. Both these companies, Zomato and Swiggy, have probably burnt over $1 billion each in acquiring customers. Is there loyalty? Remains to be seen. Are people only ordering food online outside the pandemic time only because it's cheaper? Well, a big portion of it. But now finally, I think people have understood the convenience. So there are people who will stay and they'll say, okay, the platform I want to work with is who's more reliable, who's faster, who always gives me better food, etc. So I think that's what has changed a lot in some of these spaces. Even if you look at the aggregator model for e-commerce right now, so if you look at Amazon and Flipkart, they're both investing billions of dollars right now to acquire customers. And over time, they will be able to make this into a profitable operation. So I think your capital planning has to be quite nuanced, depending on the sector that you're getting into.
Right. And I think if you could offer one small piece of advice as to how students right now could upskill themselves, given the amount of free time that they have.
Oh, wow. That's great. Yes. If your free time is going to come to, I think, partially an end with classes opening, but yes, you'll save a lot of time in commute. But yeah, I think the resources available online are incredible. You've got to, one of the most enjoyable things I find are some of the TED Talks. You can pick from a variety. They're short. They're enough. Like normally they're 17 minutes, 13 to 17 minutes. Yeah. So, enough time to hold your attention. Also, when you see someone, it's proven that you absorb much more. There's some phenomenal books out there, but I don't know how many people read. I've become an audiobook file, so I use Audible. Yeah. I find that really, I find that a great use of time. They're incredible books, but I would actually say focus on the talks and the podcasts. And in fact, today, really on YouTube itself, you can get some incredible books out there. So, or incredible talks out there rather. So, it's the area that you're interested in. And if you're willing to dedicate, let's say just an hour a day of being curious online and following your passion, but being more curious, I think it's amazing how much you can learn. Let me tell you this, the smartest people I know in technology and otherwise have learned most of the stuff themselves. People don't leverage Coursera enough. People don't leverage Khan Academy enough. There's a lot of amazing resources out there on Khan Academy. I have a friend who was with me in IIM Ahmedabad. He's based in Hong Kong, very successful banker. The other day we were catching up and he was telling me he's doing a course on modern history after World War II. And he's saying it's the most fascinating thing I think I'm learning after so long. And he's, over 50 years old and he's loving this. So there's no time to stop learning, and it's up to you how much you want to. So it's where your focus or your passion is. But yes, the one tip would be carve out a little bit of time every day rather than saying, okay, you can't binge learn. It's a little hard to do. Like you can binge watch Netflix, but you can definitely, carve out an hour a day to say, I'm going to do this, even while, you're walking or you're on a treadmill or you're doing nothing else, you can do that. So I think that will hold you in really good stead. So when you get out of the pandemic, you can say, yes, I got something positive out of this.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so to have a little chit chat at the end, we have also prepared a rapid fire round for you, a small one. And we just would say that you have to answer this with only whatever the first thought comes up with your heart. That's it, sir. You can take 5 to 10 seconds to answer. Should I begin, sir?
Done. Please start.
All right, sir. So, sir, the first one is that what is the most courageous professional decision that you have taken till now?
Courageous professional decision?
Yes, sir.
I think I can tell you straight, it was the toughest one. We had to let go of a fairly large number of folks after 2 months of the pandemic. And it was heart-wrenching, but I think it was the right thing to do. Yes, I couldn't sleep well for at least a week after that, or even while taking the decision, because I was ending up penalizing the people who were there and were giving 12 hours or more every day to work. They were being penalized. They had taken cuts in salaries, and after a certain point of time, they would probably leave us. So it was the right thing to do for the business, but by far the toughest. You know, I've never
All
taken.
right, sir. What is the most notorious thing that you've done as a child?
Okay. You'll have to give me just a second because I have a.
All right, sir.
I think there's anyone else to take it. Just give me a second, please.
Sure, sir.
I'm sorry. There's no one else to get that. So, the most notorious thing while in college,
As a child, as a college, you can also answer, sir.
I've skipped college a lot of times. I can tell you that. I've jumped out of windows and gone to check my motorcycle if it's okay. But yeah, in school we did some pretty notorious things, including causing all kinds of mini explosions in the washrooms, etc. So we're pretty bad. I got suspended from school. I'm not proud of it, but I was suspended from all extracurriculars for actually 3 months, and that was really sad because I was very heavily into extracurriculars. So, and I'm still in touch with my headmaster. He doesn't let me forget that. So. Okay.
Great, sir, that you admit. But the third one is, if make my trip, what?
Your voice is breaking up, Hardik.
Hello.
Yeah, maybe you take over.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I think.
I request Aryan and Ayushi
Sir,
to take over,
yeah.
please.
Yeah.
So the third question, sir, if hypothetical situation, God forbid, doesn't happen, if Make My Trip were to
See,
close,
my voice is breaking.
where will you invest your money and in which industry?
Yeah, that's not a thought I'm willing to entertain. But,
Yeah.
but right now, I would just say if we were to diversify between health tech and ed tech, I think both of them are, they've also proven to be pretty much bulletproof businesses. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but the fun of travel is something else. But right now, it would have been nice to be diversified into one of these.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you were given a choice between money and soft power, which one will you choose?
Money and soft power.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
What is soft power? Sorry.
Sir, I mean, if you were given a choice between money and let's say better hierarchy in the organization, right now you are at the helm.
Oh, okay.
But if you were given a choice between one of them, what would you choose?
Yeah. There's just no doubt. And I'm not saying it just to be preachy, but I can tell you guys the money thing. In fact, I oftentimes have said this at convocation speeches, and I'd like to tell you, when we pass out of colleges and we get our first job, there's an unspoken thing, and there's very often a race upon, who's going to get the highest salary. And then you get to the next threshold and the next threshold. Let me tell you guys, it's the biggest anticlimax, even when you get to that new milestone. Nothing changes for multiple reasons. So people have a race who will get to this kind of salary and that kind of salary. Because firstly, the government takes away a good, 1/3 of that. So what you get into your bank is much less. More importantly, nothing changes. I'm not being philosophical. Nothing changes because it's almost an anticlimax. You're saying, so what changed? Because you've already reached a certain level where that extra few lakhs is not going to change anything in your life at all. So please never chase that. Always take your career decisions with a long-term lens. Join the kind of company where you're going to learn a lot. That's going to hold you in good stead. Join the kind of company where people are happy, where they take care of their employees. That's far more important. So those are the right things. The money will always work out 1 year, 2 years here or there, and it's immaterial. It's actually the worst kind of lens you can take while choosing a job
Money.
or not taking anything. Yeah, it's in fact, if someone is paying you more, it's reason to be suspicious, because it's like if someone is giving you more than the market rate of interest, you know what it's telling? It's telling you that it's a risky loan, and you're probably never going to get your money back. So, and many cases. So that's, as all of you should know that being commerce students. So be wary of someone who wants to pay you too much money.
Any one-line piece of advice for millennials, this generation?
Yeah, I think you're probably, coming into the workforce at the most exciting time ever. I don't think ever in history was so much possible sitting literally, and many of you like to work, like I've got two teenage, well, one of my kids is now 20, so not even teenage. They like to work actually in their beds, which is terrible. But you know, never ever in life has it been possible to do so much with a little device. So the power today that you have is amazing. So you can really dream big, and if you're willing to follow that up with, like I said, curiosity, and there's never going to be, I think, a compromise with hard work.
Yes.
Honestly, this thing, you can achieve it.
Any adventure sport that you miss trying, that you wish you
Yeah,
had tried?
yes, I have a regret, I can tell you. While I love scuba diving, but I tried to ski very late in life, and I realized it's one of those things you should do much earlier. So this was about 3 or 4 years ago. We were on ski slopes, and my daughter, who was then maybe 16, took to it like, fish to water. And I was struggling. My wife was struggling, because it's just one of those things you've got to learn earlier. And I think those thoughts about falling and breaking legs and being stranded, etc., come into your mind. So I wish I had taken up skiing much earlier. But otherwise, no, I think most of the rest you can still do it.
Just one word answer to the biggest strength that, or the biggest quality that you attribute your success to, in you. One word answer.
I think resilience.
All right, sir. Sir, the last question for the day. Can we expect that after COVID you will come to SRCC and take a guest lecture?
Yeah, I would love to, actually. I would love to come to DU. I can't, ma'am won't like me saying it, but I'll go on the way to Stephens and have, the famous samosa and nimbu pani there. But I'll come to SRCC for sure, and I'll be happy to do this.
Deep, we'll serve better samosas.
Okay, we'll have a tasting competition, Reena. We'll
and you will also come to my GBO students and check them out for your company as well.
Yeah, we'd like to do that. If this is the quality, then you clearly got very bright folks, high standard, and we would love to do that. We'll connect separately for that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure. May I now please invite Dr. Simit Kaur, Principal Ma'am, to say a few words.
Thank you so much. It has indeed been a delight listening to Mr. Deep Kalra, everything that you said. Some of the very important lessons that you made our students learn were primarily that over the time, actually entrepreneurship is no longer a taboo. I remember about 35 years ago, one would never even think of anybody marrying into a person who had set up its own business. Especially a startup. It's only the IITians and the MBAs who in the past couple of years have brought in such a favorable kind of a conducive environment for startups. And this is actually something which is now being looked upon. And this view has also been strengthened on account of the population explosion and the inability of the manufacturing sector to provide adequate jobs to the youngsters. So even from the government's perspective, setting up your own startups and providing you an environment wherein startups can flourish and sustain has become an ideology of the government. And I would also like to inform Mr. Kalra that educational institutions are no longer now only indexed on the basis of the placements that they are offering, but the incubation and the kind of ideas or the startups is also a parameter now on what the best educational institutions are ranked upon. I think other than this, what you also hit upon was for a student or during your life, learning is a lifelong process. So if you think you've done your GBO, you've done your master's and that's the end, it's, I think, no longer the same. The pace at which things are changing in the external environment, while the fundamentals of learning would remain the same, adapting and innovating to change is something very important. And based upon what Mr. Kalra also mentioned, he said, if this business is not working, you diversify. So diversification was another very important key point, which is a takeaway from today's session. And talking about adaptability, it's a very important example, which in management schools is often taught about, is the Pike syndrome. So if you are not adapting and not learning that you are into a new environment, the Pike would perish. So being from a management school, an economics fundamentals and commerce fundamentals, please understand that you must learn to remain adapting to nature in a diversified manner. And also a very important learning, which I also personally enjoyed listening to, Deep, was your emphasis on imbibing ideas and implementing those ideas which are long-term and sustainable, and not letting the money part actually make you a detour into your ultimate objective in life. As they say, if you're on the right path, which motivates you, automatically the financial aspects would come in. But also let me inform my students, Mr. Kalra would now be on the backward bending supply curve of his labor, where higher wages are not motivating enough to offer more services. So we all need to attain at least the threshold level to be able to understand which directional mode we have to go for. Also, sir, if you allow me a personal question from my end, when you were talking about the capital planning aspect, if you could just very briefly inform, what is the kind of satisfaction you got while you were working on pure commercial projects vis-a-vis your association with Ashoka University, which is an educational institution? So when you are aligning your thoughts and time towards a so-called merit code, which in economics we call, is there inherent difference in the satisfaction that you get by promoting an educational institution vis-a-vis promoting any ordinary product, which could be a good or a service? And with this, I would close my observations and look forward to hearing your observations, sir, on it.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. I think not only have you summarized it well, but I think you've actually taken even further meaning out of it. And that's the reason why you're the principal of a top college of India. But I loved your question, and I think it's I think the Maslow's hierarchy is what I would use the framework here, and I don't know if students, looks like they're all nodding, so they're familiar with it, and it's something which you will relate to. We learned it in OB, so I didn't learn it in college. So obviously you guys are learning it. I learned it in my MBA. It's about that. I think, yes, basic needs, very important. You have to fulfill them first. And then you're actually always trying to move up and trying to fulfill other kind of needs. And the highest level is probably self-actualization. But if you look at it, so Ashoka has been very satisfying at that level. I think just before you joined the chat, we spoke about Ashoka a bit. And I was saying, for me, the real reason was I feel giving back for an education point of view is probably among the best ways, and therefore the involvement there, and also the big gap of in our country for liberal arts, and how the liberal arts curriculum has not evolved over time. And for me, these were the few reasons why I got involved with Ashoka. So it's been immensely satisfying to be on the board of governors and the board, and I try to give as much time as possible, but the real movers and shakers of that university are different. So some of them you might know, like Pramod Sinha and Ashish Dhawan, etc. They are very involved. One is involved only from a board capacity. But the other very interesting example is the satisfaction that one got by developing the Arogya Setu app. That was something which is unmatched. And the whole company, not just the 20 people who were involved with the project, and I was very actively involved with the government to push that. But the whole company had a different level of pride and really feeling of achievement through it. And it was a pro bono project. We were actually investing a lot of money and time, but I think it was the right thing to do. So clearly, as you will go ahead in your career, but even earlier on, if you can keep a mix of these things, and I think it's linked to the earlier question that Hardik asked me around, money versus soft power. Aryan asked me. So I think it's, you will realize yourself, and you must talk to your parents and to other seniors who you can, etc. And they'll all tell you almost the same thing, that the wrong decisions I made was when I was chasing short-term goals, and very often they were monetary goals, because they came and they were anticlimactic because they didn't make any difference in my life. But the best decisions I made were the ones when I was taking a long-term view, and I was chasing a goal, and I was fulfilling a need which was much higher up, because of the long-term satisfaction then. So yeah, I think that thought hopefully I've answered my question.
Thank you so much. And one thing, wherever you eat the samosas, irrespective of that, please come to SRCC.
I would love to, ma'am. I would love
Thank
to.
you. Thank you.
I'll make sure I will come.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Principal Ma'am. I now invite Dr. Aruna Jha Ma'am, Coordinator GBO and faculty member, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Ma'am, you're on mute.
Yourself, unmute
I've realized. Good evening, everyone. Sir, I'm sure this fireside chat has left an indelible impression on many young minds. And some may have even started contemplating entrepreneurial ventures, sir. I thank you for your time and for igniting the passion in the participants to reach the top and keep holding on to it, importantly. I take this opportunity to thank our principal, Dr. Simrat Kaur, for her constant encouragement and her vision. Last but not least, I thank all the members of my SRCC family and the participants for making this chat a success. Thank you and have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye, Rina. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Ma'am, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for joining.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Principal, ma'am.
So much, ma'am.